In the heart of an ancient city filled with winding alleys and sunlit courtyards, there stood a small clock shop nestled between a bakery and a bookstall. The shop was modest, with a dusty window and a wooden sign that read, "Time Repaired." Inside, an old man named Horace sat each day at his workbench, surrounded by gears, springs, and ticking clocks of all kinds. He was known throughout the city not only for his skill but for his unusual way of speaking. He never answered a question with haste. Instead, he paused, looked at his timepieces and said, "Let us not waste the question or the time." One morning, a young man named Arran burst through the door. He was sharp-eyed, well-dressed, and always in a rush. A merchant's son. Arran had big dreams. He wanted to travel the world, start a business, write a book, learn music, paint murals, and become fluent in 5 languages. But for all his dreams, Arran had one habit he couldn't seem to shake. He always said, "Tomorrow." He greeted Horace breathlessly. "Master Horace, I've come to buy a clock." Horace looked up slowly. "What for?" "A clock to remind me not to waste time," said Arran, "so I can do all the things I've planned. I've been meaning to start, but I always seem to get distracted." Horace studied the boy. "I will give you a clock, but first I ask one thing." "Name it," Arran said. "Come back tomorrow, at the stroke of 9. I will have your timepiece ready." "Done," said Arran, already halfway out the door. But the next morning, Arran didn't come. He had overslept and told himself, "I'll go the day after." The day after, he got caught up at the marketplace. The next, he told a friend he would visit his shop after lunch, but forgot. 1 week turned to 2. Then a month. Arran's list of dreams remained untouched, scribbled in a notebook beside his bed. He told himself he needed more time. He would start after the festival, after the new season, after things calmed down, but things never did. One evening, nearly a year later, Arran passed the clock shop again. It looked the same, quiet, weathered, timeless. Guilt tugged at his chest. On impulse, he pushed the door open. A chime rang, soft and familiar. Horace was at his bench, polishing a golden pocket watch. Arran stood sheepishly. "I was supposed to come back." "I know," Horace said without judgment. "I got busy, distracted. I kept saying I'd come tomorrow." Horace nodded and turned toward a small cabinet. From it he retrieved a wrapped bundle and handed it to Arran. "I finished your clock long ago, but when you didn't return, I decided to keep it safe until you were ready." Arran unwrapped the bundle carefully. Inside was the most intricate timepiece he had ever seen. A brass and oak desk clock, its face etched with symbols, an hourglass, a tree, a candle, and a sun. But there were no numbers, no hands, just a small plaque at the base that read, "This moment." Arran stared. "It doesn't tell time. It tells the only time that matters," Horace said. "Now." Arran frowned. "But how will this help me?" Horace stood and motioned for Arran to follow him into the back room, a place no customer had ever been. Inside was a strange sight, a wall covered in hundreds of clocks. Some old, some new, some ticking, some silent, some cracked. Horace gestured toward them. "Every one of these belonged to someone who came in, like you, full of plans. They said, 'I'll begin when I have time, or I'll chase my dreams when life slows down.' So I kept their clocks." "Why?" Arran asked, stepping closer. "Because they ran out of time before they used it." Arran turned. "You mean they died?" Horace nodded. "They waited, they planned, but they never began. Time doesn't wait for plans." The room fell silent except for the soft ticking of clocks. Arran felt the weight of the room press on him. All those clocks, all those lives, waiting for the right moment that never came. "Horace," he whispered, "how do I start?" The old clockmaker smiled. "Stop saying someday. Choose something, one thing, and begin today. Even 5 minutes is enough. Let that be your ticking." That night, Arran took the clock home and placed it on his desk. No ticking, no movement. Just that phrase staring back at him, this moment. He sat in silence for a while, then walked to the attic where his grandfather's old flute lay in a cracked leather case. It was dusty and out of tune, but somehow it felt like the right place to begin. He wiped it clean, sat down, and tried to play a note. It came out sharp and squeaky. He laughed at himself. His first step was far from graceful, but it was something. The next day he tried again, and the next. He watched simple tutorials, mimicked melodies, and kept a journal of his progress. 10 minutes a day became 15. Some days he practiced for only 5 minutes. Other days, an hour slipped by without him noticing. By the end of the week, he could play a simple song, slowly and shakily, but clearly. By the end of the month, he knew several songs by heart. He began to recognize something powerful in those moments of effort, the compound effect of consistency. Just a little every day was building something that once felt impossible. It changed how he saw time, not as something to chase or delay, but as something to invest. If I can do this with just a little each day, he thought, what else is possible? He imagined himself in 1 year, then 2, then 5. What kind of person could he become? Not by taking leaps, but by taking steps. That thought sparked a quiet fire inside him. Years later, Arran grew into a man of many talents. He never became a master of all trades, but he pursued many of his dreams. He traveled, he wrote, he played music, he learned to cook, he made art. And every time he began something new, he would glance at the strange little clock on his desk, still ticking. When people asked how he managed to do so much, he would smile and say, "I stopped waiting for the perfect time. I started with the time I had." And every once in a while, he'd walk by Horace's shop, now run by a young apprentice. The sign still read, "Time repaired." But Arran had learned the truth. Time doesn't need repairing, we do.